If you work with software, you've probably heard of GitHub. In fact, you may have some code on GitHub. However, you might not know all of the ins and outs of working with GitHub. In this video, we're going to be setting up a repository on GitHub, adding code to it, reviewing the commits on GitHub, working with issues, creating pull requests, creating tags, generating releases, and a lot more. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. I do that by providing videos here on YouTube multiple times per week. Plus, I have a weekly podcast. I also provide courses on C#, web development, and much more on IamTimCorey.com. The profits from those sales are what pays for the free content here on YouTube so that everyone can have a great education in C# and the things around it, not just those who can afford it. Okay, let's go into GitHub. Now, this is my GitHub repository. If you don't have GitHub, then go ahead and sign up for it. It's github.com and sign up. But once you're in there, there is a new button here where I create a new repository. And I'm going to call this repository Intro to GitHub. All one word, no spaces. Now, the description, this is going to be a demo for YouTube on how to use GitHub. I am going to create it as a public repository. I could create it as private if I'm doing it just for myself or my internal team. I do have those, but for this one, it's going to be public. Now, I want to add a README file. This is pretty important for GitHub especially. If you have a README file, this is the file that gets displayed when you go right to the repository. So this is going to be where you describe the project, where you talk about its roadmap, talk about how to install it, and those kind of things. Basically a big overview that people can read. So we want to include that by default. What that does do though, is because we're creating a README, it's also going to create our first commit for us. If you're not familiar with Git, what it does is it bundles up changes into what's called commits, and then we have multiple of those potentially and almost certainly in a project. And this is the first commit, or first bundle of changes will be the initial commit, and it will start with the README file. I'm also going to add a gitignore file. A gitignore file says, hey, these are the things that I don't want to put in my GitHub repository. This is important because there are certain files that get generated automatically or that have secrets in them or things like that that should not be put into GitHub. So by checking this box, they will not be put into Git, which means they also won't then hit GitHub. And I want to choose a template. If you say none, then you've got a problem. It won't allow you to create the repository. So you have to choose a template here. The cool thing is if I type Visual Studio, I can create this. Now, I could have created the gitignore file locally. That's just fine. In fact, the .NET command line will allow you to create a Visual Studio gitignore file quite easily. So you could do that locally if you want, but this is just very convenient. And this will put the gitignore and the README file in the one commit. Finally, license. I am going to license this. When you put code in the public view on GitHub especially, you want to create a license for it. Tell people what they can and cannot do with your code. Because even though it's open source and even though people can read your code, that does not give them permission by default to copy it and use it for themselves. That's what the license does. So we're going to choose a license. And there's a whole bunch of options here. We're going to choose the MIT license. Now you may say, well, Tim, how do you know which license to choose? Well, you could say learn more right here, or you can go to the site that GitHub maintains, which is choosealicense.com. So again, that's choosealicense.com. Okay? And you can choose which license to use. And here we're going to choose based upon if you want simple and permissive, then it's the MIT license, short and to the point. It lets people do almost anything they want to your project. And examples of this include .NET, So just know that Microsoft uses the MIT license when licensing .NET. Now, if you care about sharing and improvements, then the GNU GPL version 3. But if you're like, that's only 2 licenses, I had a whole list of licenses as options, what are the other options? You can come down here to more licenses are available, and it will list all of those. And it will list what the permissions are, what the conditions are, and what the limitations are. And you can find out more information. But just to be clear, this site is not a lawyer, and neither am I. So if you have stuff that you really need to protect and make sure you do right, consult a lawyer. But in general, for general projects, for example, this source code, I really don't care what you do with this source code. The only real thing I would think that just wouldn't be a good idea is to share it as your own. But you know what? I'm not going to get terribly upset if you do. Okay. So I'm going to choose the MIT license and, have fun. Use it how you want. So that's what I've chosen here, but you can choose what works for you. Also notice it's going to set up the main branch as a default branch. So by default, the primary branch will be main in GitHub. You can change that name in settings. So if you want to change it to something else, go ahead and do that. But for us, that sets up our repository. Let's go ahead and hit create repository. Okay, and there is our repository. Notice we have all these are labeled with initial commit. We have one commit over here. Let's click on that. And notice we have only one commit, but that one commit has changed multiple files. So notice the green means an add. Well, of course, there was nothing there beforehand, so it added all these things. Okay, and that's, you can search through and see everything added, but really that's just the whole file is what it did. It added everything. Okay, so let's hit back here, and we can look at, if we go back here, look at the overall we've got. We've got, here's our code. We have down here our readme.md. That's our readme file that I added and said, hey, I want you to add this. And it just puts some basic information in it. And then we have over here on the right an about, which this is the description of our project, which note by default the readme puts in the readme as well, just to have something to put there. So we have our project name, intro to GitHub, which also then creates a URL for us, github.com/my name, Tim Corey, /intro to GitHub. So this is the basic overview of your project. But let's start actually using this. We have no releases, okay? We have no tags. We only have one branch, so we can't switch branches either. We have no issues. We have no pull requests. Let's go ahead and start using some of these things to see how the various things work. All right, so let's start by cloning this. We're going to go code. There's a drop down here. I use HTTPS. I find it the easiest thing to use. I hit copy, and what this will allow me to do is it will allow me to go to my temp folder, which I can bring up here. And in here, I can open up my terminal window. I find that the easiest way of going about this, it's up to you how you want to do it. But let's keep it kind of visible here. So you can see that the folder's empty right now. But if I say git clone and paste in that URL. Now, if this is the first time you've done this, it's going to ask you to log into GitHub because it has to let your local Git know that you have permission to your repository or permission on GitHub at all. So it's going to figure out who you are and associate everything. I've already done that. So now I hit enter. It's going to clone my repository. Notice there's a folder in here now called intro to GitHub. Inside there's 3 files, the same 3 files that are in my intro to GitHub. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Visual Studio. We're going to create a new project. But notice this intro to GitHub name. I'm going to use that to create, when I create a new project. We're going to create a Blazor WebAssembly project. I call this Intro to GitHub. Now I normally do not name my solution and my project name the same, but I want my project name to be Intro to GitHub, but my solution name, which also dictates the folder name, will be Intro to GitHub. So they're the same. It's, normally what I do is I'd probably say, front end or something like that, and then take it off here like that. But for simplicity's sake, I'm going to just call it Intro to GitHub. Okay, it's in the temp folder, which means that it's going to put that into this folder. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit next. .NET 6. I'm going to put the progressive web application on just for fun, because why not? We're not actually going to do coding in C# really. We're just going to use this as a stand-in for how you actually use GitHub. So if you're not hugely familiar with C#, no worries. Or if you're not hugely familiar with Blazor WebAssembly, no worries. It's just a bit of code that we're going to do to kind of show off how to use GitHub. So this just adds a little bit extra in case you want to play with the project afterwards. Hit create. And it looks like I named something wrong. Let's go back. It should be just C temp. Let's try it again. All right, let's go back. Let's look at the temp directory. There's nothing in here that indicates that. I think this is a phantom. So I've already done this once on my computer, testing it out. But let's try and get this to work. And for whatever reason, it seems like it worked now. The one thing I changed was, notice I called my project Intro to GitHub FE. It seemed like it didn't like the fact that Intro to GitHub and Intro to GitHub for solution and project, which I don't like either, but I wanted to keep it simple. Normally this works. I think it's a glitch in Visual Studio. I don't think it was something I did, but maybe it was. Maybe typing back and forth, it messed it up. So in any event, the only thing that's a little different now is if we go to the folder, let's pull us up. We now have our, I see. So it creates the solution name, the project name, and then a solution name folder as well. The solution name folder is empty. That's why I was having a problem, because the solution name folder is the same as the project folder. So that's the reason why I was giving that error. So it didn't like the fact that the project and solution had the same name. So in any event, we now have in our temp folder, we have that Intro to GitHub, which has a whole bunch of extra stuff that's not on GitHub yet. So let's do this. Let's commit all of this to our repository and push it up. Now we can do this in a few different ways. We've got our command line. If we go to change directory into our Intro to GitHub folder, clear the screen, and say git status, we'll see that our branch is up to date, but we have untracked files. Notice it only lists 2. That's really because of the fact that everything is inside the Intro to GitHub FE folder. So there's actually a lot of files that we can add. Now we can add this by just saying git add and the dot, which can be good, K bad. So the dot basically says add everything, but there may be things that you don't want to add, which is why it's nice to have a GUI that allows you to select and deselect. So we can go to Visual Studio instead. I haven't changed anything yet. We can go to Visual Studio, go to Get Changes tab, and notice there's a whole bunch of changes here that need to be added. I can just on the top directory, right click and say Stage, and that will put everything into Stage Changes. I could go through and look for something and say, oh, you know what? I don't actually want to commit the solution file. I do. But if I didn't, I could right click on this and say unstage. And so I could stage everything and then pull things out I don't want. But in this case, I want everything. Go back to the command line here. Let's clear this out. I did not do anything. Let's clear the screen and say get status again. we'll see is a whole bunch of new files that have been added to our stage. Changes to be committed. That's the stage. Okay, and now I can give it a commit message. Now on the command line, I could say, let's clear the screen, say git commit, and the simple way is say git commit -m. And what this will do is it will allow you to create a quick little message that you can put right in the command line, or you can just say git commit, and that will pop open the text editor that you chose when setting up Git. It will allow you to create a full commit message. Or you can again go to Visual Studio and just type your message out. So we could say initial code commit. And then if you hit enter twice, leave a blank line, then this is the commit message, the full body of the message. This is the nice, short, and punchy commit message that everyone will see, but then this is the body that explains more about what you did here. So added the Blazor WebAssembly template project files. Okay, and we're going to hit stage. Now I could hit stage and push or and sync. We're not going to do that. We're just going to hit commit stage. This is the equivalent of saying just git commit. So git commit, and now if you come here to command line, git status, we'll see that we're on the main branch, and our branch is ahead of origin main by 1 commit. Okay, we can use the git push to publish our local commits. Well, I wouldn't push yet. What I would do instead, I would do a fetch or a pull first to make sure I had the latest changes, and then I'd push. So in Visual Studio, you can do something similar by, there's these drop down here, fetch, which I'm going to do a fetch. There should be nothing there. There isn't. But if there was, it'd say, hey, you have, what fetch does is it finds out what is, what's on the server that you don't have. In this case, nothing. But that way you know if you're ready to then push up. Or you could say, I want you to pull the latest changes, which not only finds out what's available, but also merges them into your code. But in this case, I'm going to do a push now that we're done. We don't have anything else to do here. So I can just say we're done. I can also come over here and say push to origin, which origin is the name of GitHub. Origin is your, I hate using this word, but server. It's a place where you call, kind of the place where you got your code from initially, where you cloned from. That's usually called origin. So you could also do sync, which is again a pull and then a push. So again, it's a pretty safe thing to do. But we're going to hit sync, which is a pull and a push. It's going to push those changes up to GitHub. Now that they're on GitHub, let's go to GitHub and hit refresh. And we'll notice that we have more files here. And over here on the right, we have 2 commits. So let's review the commits we have in GitHub. And GitHub is packed full of information. So whenever you see, information on the screen, it's probably clickable. So in this case, look at this. If I mouse over 2 commits, I can see that I can click on this. And if I click on it, you'll see the commits in our repository. And you can look at the state of the repository at that point. So you can say, let's browse the repository at this point in history. That's this little icon here. So the repository looked like this. Look familiar? Well, yeah, because that's what the initial commit looked like. But we can go back. We can either hit the back button or just go to our main branch or click. If you ever want to get back to that starting point, you can click on the name of the project. At the very top, that takes you back to the starting point. Go back to commits, and instead of doing the view at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to click on the actual commit. So on the message itself, notice initial code commit, that's the short name for what I gave it. If I click it, it has a short name, and then it has the full information about what what I did. All right, so add the Blazor WebAssembly template project files. And notice that we have 34 changed files with 1,300 additions and 0 deletions. That's the number of lines. So it's going to show you everything. You can collapse these down if you want and look at only the certain ones. We're not going to do this yet because of the fact that there's not really changes here. It's just additions. I want to see what happens when we change something, which we're going to do next. Okay, so let's talk next about going back to a main project. And if we look at this project, we'll see that the README is pretty bad. It just has the mashed together title. We can fix that. It has a simple description, but nothing really great. Let's make some changes to the README. But to do that, one of the things I want to do is I want to show you how to use issues. So let's say you were the maybe the owner, maybe not. Even non-owners of the project can create issues usually. So maybe I'm just a random person on the internet and I say, hey, you know what? I think that README kind of sucks. It can be better. So I'm going to go over to issues. I'm going to say, I want to create a new issue. And for issues, I've covered this before, but make sure that your issues are very clear. So what do you want to see for this issue? Fix the README so that it has valuable information. And you can say things like, I want to see a better title, description, and maybe a roadmap. Okay, I'm shortcutting this process, but this is where you put all the information you want to see. Maybe it's a bug you found. Maybe it's just, like in this case, an improvement you want to see. So this is my description. Notice it says that Markdown is supported. If you're not familiar with Markdown, it's a great little tool that you should learn, especially when working with GitHub, that allows you to create HTML style pages without writing HTML. For instance, if I wanted to make this title bold, I could use this bold right here, which notice all it does is it puts 2 stars on either side of title. But if you go to preview, you'll see that title is bold. That's because it's using Markdown. I can also undo that bold. So this gives you some shortcuts to show you how to do that. We can use the bulleted list or numbered list or checkboxes and things like that. Cool stuff you can do in your issue, also in your pull requests and other areas. But just an added additional way to allow you to better document the issue. So let's hit submit new issue. And now I have issue number 1. Notice that it says right here, number 1. That's pretty important to know what the issue is, because that way you can refer to it in your commit messages. And in fact, we're going to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do, just to show you that you can do it, is I'm going to assign myself to it. This allows people to see that, hey, I'm going to do this work. Okay. I can also write a message. For example, working on this now. It's up to you. Don't close with comment, just comment. And you're saying, hey, I'm working on this. It's assigned to me. I'm going to take care of this, or anything else you want to about this issue. People can respond back and forth with suggestions and so on, but I have assigned it to myself because I want to work on it. And that way people know not to also create a pull request to fix this issue unless I ask them to. So now we're going to start working on issue number 1. So let's come back over to our Visual Studio. And you don't see readme.md here, but there's an icon right up here. Let's zoom in here. It says switch between solutions and available views. If you click on it, it's going to allow you to switch to folder view. So double click folder view. And now you see the folder view with all the files in it. You could also open up the folder with VS Code. That can be an easy way to do it because VS Code doesn't do the solution view. But this is pretty quick to switch between the two of them. So I'm going to select readme.md, and I'm going to make some changes to our README file. So this again is markdown. So intro to GitHub, I'll put some spaces there. And let's put a roadmap. And let's say version 0.0.1 is going to be just updated README information. And then version 0.0.2 is going to be the updated counter page. Whatever you want to have for your roadmap, if you have version numbers associated with it or just things that are coming up you could do as well, it's up to you how you want to do this. I'm going to put like this. I'm going to put some stars just to say these are unordered lists, but that's the information I want to do. You could, again, take these off, which I think I will. I'm going to take them off because you don't always know the version numbers, but that's kind of the version numbers we'll probably stick with for these things. So now I have an updated README. Now I can do is switch back using that icon, switch between solution and available views. Go back to the solution view, just because that's the default I want to see in my Solution Explorer. Let's go to GitHub changes. And again, I could do the commit here or in my command line. I'll do it here. I'm going to right click on README and say stage. And I'm going to say update README information. Not the greatest of commit messages, but it gets the job done. And addresses number 1. So that's all put in here. But when I say number 1 or the pound sign and 1, that is going to refer to the issue number that I want to associate with this commit. So I've said this issue is linked to this commit. Just by saying number 1. So I'm going to commit stage and I'm going to sync. Again, a sync is going to be, first it'll commit, but then it will pull down from GitHub, make sure there's no changes on GitHub, and then it will push up my changes. So let's do that. And it should be done in just a second. I'm going to bring up my GitHub page. I'll hit refresh. And notice that Tim Corey added a commit that referenced this issue now. So that issue is right here. And if we go back over to our code, we'll see we have 3 commits. If we look at the commits and look at the last commit, you'll notice it has addresses number 1. If you hover over it, it's now a link that links to that issue. So I can click on it and go right to this issue. So they're kind of tied together now where we have an issue, it's linked to commit, we can track that through to production. So now let's create a release. Now notice over here, there's no releases. But let's just pretend we want to create an alpha release. A release is not yet for the public, it's a pre-release, but it's something that, if you're on a cutting edge, you could use this release to, see the latest changes if you really want to. So to do that, the first time we're going to do this, we're going to do this in GitHub. The next time we're going to do this, we're going to do this locally. And I'll show you the difference in how to do this. But in releases, say create new release. And we have an option to choose a tag. If you're not familiar with Git tags, what they do is they're essentially just a tag. It's a identifier that you basically point to a specific commit and say, hey, this is something. Whether it's a version or it's a feature or something like that, we can tag a certain commit. We don't have any tags. We're going to create the tag on GitHub. Now, what this will do is it will create a lightweight tag. If you're familiar with tags, there's two types of tags. Lightweight tag is just a name. That's all it is. An annotated tag has not only the name, but it also has who tagged it, when it was tagged, and more information about that tag. In general, we would like to have annotated tags. But GitHub, when you create your own tag, then it creates a lightweight tag. Just so you know the difference. We'll see both and we'll see the differences later. But I'm going to create a tag. So I'm going to create a version, and I'll say version 0.0.1, but I'll say dash alpha, meaning this is a pre-release version. And it's the most, it's just a, it's not a minor, it's just a tiny change. So we're not going to get into semantic versioning right now, but this is just a tiny change. It's an alpha version. So you can look at semantic versions down the lower right-hand corner here if you want more information on how to do some actual semantic versioning. But I've created this name. I'm going to say create new tag v0.0.1 dash alpha unpublish. And then I can give it a title. So this release title is going to be just readme release. And I can give it a description. This release focuses on a better README file. Now, would I normally create a release that just had a README file change? No, I probably wouldn't, because that's not really a releasable thing. A release is normally a new version of your software or a new version of your site. But in this case, we're just doing it for demo purposes. Now, you can create the release notes in this window. So this window focuses on release notes. That's not great release notes because it doesn't tell you a whole lot. You can include automatically generated release notes. Now, I don't have pull requests, so it's going to tell me that. I click on it and it says there were no pull requests associated with commits, including this release. So automatically generated notes were not created, but it does say, hey, full change log, and it links to that tag. What that will do is it will show you all of the information that was committed to this project for this release. So the auto-generated release notes don't give you a whole lot unless you use pull requests. And we're going to do that in a little bit. But for now, I just want to show you the fact that you'll get this message and, oh no, don't worry. It did put this line in, but that's all it's going to do because you have no pull requests associated with this release. So you can also attach binaries. So for instance, if you were going to be, if this was a WinForm application, maybe you publish the application, create a self-contained exe that is your application. You could drag and drop that into this section and then associate that version with that exe. So instead of having to, or forcing your viewer to compile the application to create their own based upon this release, you can just give them the compiled version of that application. So if it was something more complicated, let's say maybe you have to have an installer, well, you could create the MSI or MSIX or whatever it was, and then put that here. The only limitation here is each file cannot be any larger than 2 gigabytes, just so you know. So it will also create for us a zip file of all the source code at this point as part of this release. We'll see that in a minute. I'm not attaching anything extra, but we'll see those 2 files actually created for us. This is a pre-release. So what I'm saying is, hey, it's non-production ready. I marked it as alpha, which also indicates that, but we're going to mark it here as it's not a production ready release, which means it won't show up in the releases as a current or latest release. We'll see that in a little bit. So now that I've done all of this work and said, this is the tag, this is the name of the release right here. This is the description or changelog for the release. Here's any binaries or additional things I want to attach to this release, which are none. And the fact that this is a pre-release, now I can hit publish release. And so I can see this is a pre-release, but here is my release. If I click back one level to releases, you'll see that I have one release with two assets, source code in a zip file and source code in a tar file. So I could open this up and download the website at this point in time. Now, again, it's just the raw source code. It's not a compiled version. I haven't done anything with that, but that is the point in time at which I created this release. Notice the README release is the title, and then here's my changelog, including the full changelog, which I click here, and it shows me here are the changes for version 0.0.1 alpha. And that's these 3 commits. So I go back again to intro to GitHub. You'll notice that it says releases. It still says 1 tag instead of 0 tags, but it doesn't say any releases here. That's because we don't have any production ready releases. But if I click on releases, we'll see that I actually have one pre-release. Going back here, let's actually go to issues. And if we open up the issue, it doesn't show anything here because it's a pre-release thing. And we haven't included this in a pull request either. So we want to create a branch for this issue or link a pull request in order to close this out automatically. Or what I could say is I could leave a message here. It says included in the pre-release. And in fact, I'll do that. Included in pre-release version 0.0.1 alpha. And I can close with comment. Okay, so this is closed. I didn't link it because we don't have a pull request linked to it. But now if we go back to issues, we'll see that there's none open. There is one closed. Okay, cool. So now we've covered the concept of creating a release, actually a pre-release, manually in here with a manually created tag. But let's do some work where we then create a pull request and go through kind of the more normal process of creating a full release. So first thing you want to do is create an issue. And so let's create a new issue. Make the counter page increment by 3 instead of 1. All right, that's my feature request. I could actually even say, feature, something like that. But I'll say make the counter page increment by 3 instead of 1. Currently, the counter page increments by 1 when you click the button. I want it to increment by 3. Okay, or I submit this new issue. And then I'm actually going to create one more issue. So let's create a new issue. And I'm going to say add a decrement button to counter page. We can increase the counter, but not decrease it. Please fix this. Something simple. Create a new issue. So now I have a couple of open issues. And they're kind of related. And I'm going to create a fix for both of these issues. Now I could assign to myself. We're not going to go through that again just because we've already done this once. But let's do this. Let's come back over here to our Visual Studio. And I'm going to start doing work on changing the counter page. However, I want to create a pull request out of this. I want to do this kind of the right way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new branch. Now I can do this with this ellipsis right here. If you click it, you can say new branch, create a new branch name based upon main, check out the branch. That's one way of doing it. Or what you can do is you can go to your command line and you can say git switch dash lowercase c and then give it a branch name. What this will do is it'll create the branch and it will switch to it. Either one works. All right. It's good that you know command line. It's actually the more reliable thing because of the fact that user interfaces change. And people get all upset every time Microsoft makes a change to the user interface for Git inside of Visual Studio because they're reliant on one way of doing things. If you know how to use the command line, even if something goes wrong in Visual Studio, you can switch that very easily. Every computer that has a Git UI also has the command line available to it. And the command line is the same across all devices. So therefore, it's good to really know the command line. So I will show you how to do it in Visual Studio just because it's what's available to you, but just know that the command line is also there. So we'll create a branch name. I'm going to say FEAT for feature. I'm going to put a dash, and I will say, let's go with counter updates, like so. Based upon main, I hit create, and now I am going to be on the feature counter updates branch, not the main branch. So if we go back to our command line and go to git status, we'll see we're on the feature counter updates, not the main. If I want to switch to main, I could say git checkout or git switch feature counter updates. Oops, git switch to main. There we go. And now we can say git status. You're on main. If we come back over here, it says main. If we drop this down and say, click on the feature counter updates, we're now on the feature counter updates, not on main anymore. So just to show that, we're on, again, the different branch. So we've changed it both ways just so you can see how to do that. Okay, let's start working on some changes. Let's go to our counter page. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to fix this so it increments by 3. Now I'm going to say plus equals 3. I know this code works, so we're not going to get into debugging C# and all the rest. We're just going to say, yep, cool, that works. So I am going to commit this and associate it with the issue number 2. So I'll stage this and I'll say fix increment counter action. Now increments by 3 instead of 1. So I could say issue number 2, or fixes issue number 2. There you go, fixes issue number 2. I'm going to hit commit staged, but nothing else. I am not going to try and push or sync. Just going to commit staged. Now, we also have another issue we want to address, which is we want to have a decrement or a reduce my count. So let's copy this code here. And I'm going to paste it again. I'm going to say decrement count. We're going to say minus equals 3. It will decrement the same amount as increment. We will copy the button and paste it. And we'll say this should be decrement count, and this should be decrease count. And then this should be increase count. Now we've addressed the other issue. So we're going to again stage this, and we're going to say add decrement button to counter. Adds the ability to reduce the counter value. And then fixes issue number 3. And we're going to, again, commit stage, but not try to push it. So now we have 2 outgoing, but there is no branch. If we go back to our, back to GitHub, we'll notice we only have this one branch, main. If we view all branches, we only have main. That's it. So how do we get this branch up there? Well, we could come over here, we could push and we can say push to origin, or we can do, and I'll do this in the command line. So I'm going to say, again, I could push it over here, but I'm going to say here, git push origin. Remember, that's the GitHub repository. And I put space, and I get the same branch name. So our branch name is feat counter updates. Hit enter, and that's going to push that up to GitHub. Now notice I did not use the -u, which what that would have done is it would have linked the 2. So that I can just say git push in the future, and it'll push to that branch. I'm not going to do that because of the fact it's going to be a short-term thing. If I was going to do it multiple times, then sure, I would make that change. So back over here on GitHub, let's bring that back up. And so now in our GitHub, we see that we have recent pushes of less than a minute ago. So I can again look at my branches and notice I have 2 branches now. And let's go to our branches here, and we can look at the branch. So let's look at first our main branch. Let's go back here and go to our counter. We go to pages, counter. Notice it's just ++ right here, and it has click me and just increment count. That's all we have. However, if we switch the branch, that same page, we'll see we have 2 buttons. We have the increment by 3 and decrement by 3. So this shows us how we can have 2 different versions on GitHub. One is in the feature counter updates branch, and one is in the main branch. So that is now our 2 different branches on GitHub. But we're not quite done yet. What we're going to do is we're going to create a tag. Now, I could do this in a couple different ways. I'm going to do this in the command line because it's a little easier to do this way, but I want to show you how to do it in Visual Studio as well. So I'll create a tag on this that I am going to push up as well. Actually, you know what? Let's create the pull request first because we haven't merged this into our code yet. This is still on a different branch. Now, this could be on a different branch in a different repository, and that would be okay. That's what we do when we fork. We create a copy of the repository and then create a branch there. So I don't have to have it on the same repository, but in this case it is. So I'm going to go to pull requests. I'm going to say new pull request. And I want to choose feature counter updates is going to go into main. And what it does is it says, hey, this is able to merge. What that means is that main hasn't changed since we created the feature counter update branch. If main had changed, you'd want to first merge main into the feature counter update branch and do all your merge conflict resolution locally before you then try to do a pull request. But in our case, main hasn't changed. So we can see there's 2 commits, and we can also see that the changes that have happened. So there's 1 changed file with 8 additions and 2 deletions. So we changed this line right here. We removed it and added this line instead. Now you may say, well, we didn't remove a line. We just changed a value in the line. Well, yes, but the way GitHub works, it says, okay, this is the whole line's been removed and replaced with this other line instead. So that's how they compare. And then we can see that this line was removed. And instead, we have this line, which is really the same as this line, just with this being changed. And they also have this additional new line for decrement. Okay, so we review this and go, cool, looks all good to me. And I am going to hit create pull request. And this is going to be, let's call this counter improvements. Improves the counter file to get it ready for production. I'm going to hit create pull request. Now I can create a draft pull request if I want people to review this, but I'm not quite ready yet to be done. Maybe I've got some changes in, but I'm not yet ready to say, yes, this is the final version I want to put into the code. That's what a draft pull request is. But a full pull request is the more traditional if you're ready to commit this code to the main branch. So I'll say create pull request. And now I have a pull request. Notice that it's number 4. But I only have one pull request. I've only ever created one. Yes, but I've created 3 issues. So I can refer to a pull request by the number, just like with issues. And since I just say # or hashtag and the number, it would be confusing. Is that a pull request or an issue? So instead, they don't overlap. So I have issue number 1, issue number 2, issue number 3, pull request number 4. If I create another issue, it'll be issue number 5. So we now have, if we go back to pull requests, we have one open pull request. I click it. I notice that there's a couple of commits in here. I notice that the continuous integration has not been set up. We're not going to do that in this video. It's too much to do in one video. But the branch has no conflicts with the base branch, so we're ready to commit. So I'm going to first go back before I do, go to issues. We have 2 open issues. If I click one, notice that it says, hey, you've referenced this in a commit, but that's it. Now let's go back to our pull request and say, yes, merge the pull request, which I can do with a merge commit, a squash and merge, or a rebase and merge. Let's focus just on create a merge commit. What that does, it creates a new commit for your commit list that brings in the other branch and merges that into the main line. You could do a squash and merge, which basically erases all the different commits I made. So I made 2 commits, erases those, and squashes them all into one commit that has all the changes. We're not going to do that. We want to keep the history of what I did to prepare this feature branch. So we're going to hit create a merge commit. And I'm going to leave this message as default, but this is a merge pull request number 4 from this branch. And this is what it does. Confirm that merge. It's been successfully merged and closed. So it's closed the pull request. And then I can say delete branch. Why would I do this? Because we don't need it anymore. That branch was just to give us information for the pull request. I'm going to say delete branch. So now, if we go back to our code, we'll see we only have one branch, just main. There is no more feature branch because that's been deleted. However, it is still available locally. If we go to get branch, we'll see we have 2 branches. I'm going to get switch main. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first show you, I want to show you an error. I'm going to say get branch. Actually, let's just get branch. I know the name. Now I say get branch -d for delete, lowercase. And then I will say feat counter updates. And it says error. The branch feat counter updates is not fully merged. If you're sure you want to delete it, run the git branch -D and the branch name. Now, before you just go, oh, I just need to change the letter, stop. I want you to actually think about what this message says. It says, you have not merged these changes in. Now, in our case, we actually did. Because what we did was we said, we're not going to merge it locally into main. We're going to create a pull request and merge it at the server. But I haven't gone to my main branch and pulled those changes down. So Git thinks that I have made changes that I have not yet put into my main branch. And if you just delete that branch, those changes go away. If you had not created that pull request and pushed it up the server and all the rest, then that would be a major issue. Now, I am safe, so it's not a problem. But just note this message. Don't just go, oh, use capital D instead. Always use lowercase d, because this will save you from deleting a branch that you should not delete. So how do I solve this? I actually want to solve this by going to git switch main. So I'm on main. I'm actually already on main. I'm going to say git pull. And that will bring down the new changes. Notice I have 10 changes, 8 of which are additions and 2 of which are deletions. I'm going to clear the screen here. And now I'm going to do that same git branch lowercase -d and the branch name, which will delete this branch. And it deletes it just fine. Because of the fact that now it realizes that those changes are actually in my main because I merged them in on GitHub and then pulled down those changes. So just note that error. Also note, clean up your branches you're no longer using. Otherwise, you'll have a list that's forever long and you're not sure which ones are valid and which ones are not. So now git branch shows me I have one branch. So now we have that done. I want to create a release that's an actual release, a version 0.002 that's actually production ready. So to do that, I'm going to create a tag locally. Now, again, we talked about the fact that there's 2 different ways of creating tags. I'm going to create a tag in my on my local machine using command line, and then I'll show you how to do it in Visual Studio. So to create it locally in command line, just say git tag -a for an annotated tag. And then we're going to give it a name, or the tag name, which I'm going to say v 0.0.2, no dash alpha, because this is an actual production release. And we'll say -m, and then in quotes, I'll give it a commit message or a tag message. And this is the counter page production ready. Okay, that's just what this version is all about. All right, I'm going to hit enter, and now I have a tag. So get tag, I have 2 tags, the alpha for version 1, which I actually never created a version 1 or 01, but I created a version 002. It's fine for this demo. So it's only locally though, because if I go back over here, and if let's just say I say git push, everything's up to date, right? I come back over here and I hit refresh, there's still only 1 tag. It's the alpha tag. So how do I get my tags up from local up to production? Well, the easiest way is say git push origin -- tags. This pushes all of your tags up to origin, which is, in this case, GitHub. I do that, and it pushes the tags up. And if you refresh over here, you'll see I have a version 002. There we go. There's my 002 version, which is a tag, not a release. It has assets associated, but it's not a release. It's just a tag. Okay. Now I could come over to Visual Studio, and what I could do is I can go to Git right here, and we can say GitHub, whoops. Oh, there we go. View branch history. And notice we have our tags here. So version 0.0.1-alpha, that's the green right here. And notice it just says tag and the name. If I mouse over to version 2, notice it says tag with the name. The tagger, which is my name and email address. Then it says tag date, when it was done. And then it has that message about the tag. This is the annotated tag, and this is the lightweight tag. Notice the additional information that this annotated tag provides, which is why we like the annotated tags more, which is why I recommend that you create your tags locally and push them up, as opposed to using GitHub to create new tags when you want to create a release. So that's just a note there. Now, if I wanted to, I could say, oh, you know what? This actually right here was version 0.0.1. I can right click on it. I can say new tag and fill the information out. Now, I'm not going to do that, but you could. And that would associate this commit with whatever tag I give it. So this gives you more information about how your history looks, your branching. Notice that the branch that kind of, let's zoom in here, how the branch cuts off with this this new pull request we created here, and the feature branch and merged it in. So this gives you more information about how your GitHub or your Git repository is being worked on. All right. So that's how you create the tag, and then you can come over here to push all tags to origin, and that would just push all tags instead of doing that command line of git push origin -- tags. So that's kind of an easier way if you want to use that as opposed to the command line. The nice thing about knowing the command line is you might not always have this ellipsis, and you might not know where to find this particular command. So with that, we now have on GitHub, let's go back to GitHub, we have two tags. I want to create a new commit. I'm sorry, a new release. And this one's going to be a production release, not a pre-production release. So let's go to create new release on GitHub. I'm going to choose a tag. I choose the version 0.0.2. I'm going to say the title is going to be counter production counter page release. Okay, I'm going to say this release gives you the production ready version of the counter page. Okay, and then I'm going to say auto generate release notes. Remember last time it said, hey, there's no pull request, so there's not much I can do here except give you that link to all the commits for this this release. But if I click it now, it says what's changed, and it has this right here. It says counter improvements by who did it, and then here's the link to that pull request. New contributors, and it's me. I made my first contribution to this project in this pull request, and then a full change log. So this very quickly and easily allows you to create release notes that at least give you more information. Now, it's not ideal release notes yet. Ideal release notes would give you a nice summary, maybe some instructions on how to use it, and so on. That you'll have to do manually. And you can do that right up here. You can also tweak these and change these and delete these and whatever else you want to do, but that gives you a good start. Now, again, we can attach binaries. We're not going to do that. We're also not going to check the pre-release box because it's not a pre-release. It's a production-ready release. So I hit Publish Release. And now I have published my first production-ready release. Notice it links to me, links to the pull request, and full change log. If I go over to releases, we'll see that this is the latest release. If I go to my repo, you'll see that releases, I have 2, but this one is the latest and it's actually here instead of just saying 1 release. Because this is a production ready release, therefore it advertises it as such. If we go to issues, we'll see that these are still open. Okay, but you can set up automations to then close these because a pull request was made where these were linked. All right, so we could say, hey, close these because they were included automatically, but in this case, they're still open. Okay, so that's something to think about if you want to set up those automations. There's a lot of automations you can set up in GitHub to do things like that. Also note, and we're not going to go over it in this video because we're already pretty long, but I do want to point out that notice I say hashtag and the number and it links to it, and I can then get more information about it. You can set up in the settings ways to link to external systems like Jira or Trello or something else where you say, maybe you say, TR for Trello dash, TR dash and then a number, and that would link to a Trello value or Jira dash and then a number, and that will link to a Jira issue. So you can link that just like you can link to GitHub issues and pull requests. So there's lots of cool stuff you can do with automations, a lot deeper you can go into GitHub. But this gives you a good overview of how to work with GitHub at an intro level, get you working with issues, pull requests, code, releases, and so on. Now, again, there's actions, which we haven't even touched, but this is where you do the continuous integration of making sure the code compiles when you create a pull request. So before a pull request can be approved, it has to compile. Or maybe run some unit test checks against it and things like that as well. And then we also can have actions for doing continuous delivery. So it will actually publish out to a server if you publish to the main branch or things like that. Lots of stuff you can do. You can create a wiki about your project. You can create a project Kanban boards right in GitHub and associate your project with it. And so much more stuff. The list of things in settings with webhooks, actions, and all the rest, crazy stuff you can do that. So again, we're just touching the surface of what can be done. But note that there's a ton of stuff in GitHub. I encourage you to get to know it better. I will be creating a course in this at some point because there's just so much stuff that you really should know. And it's great to have a reference to as well in case you don't use it that often, so that you can know how to use it to its full potential. There's a lot of stuff baked in. All right. I hope that you enjoyed this. I love to have your feedback on what else you want to see covered in a future video on GitHub. What are the things that you're not sure how to do, how it works? What are the things you are not sure if it actually even includes? Okay. Let me know down in the comments. If you have a suggestion though for a future video on this stuff, then go to suggestions.imtimcorey.com and leave that there, and other people can upvote it. So if you search for GitHub or something like that, you can look for the ones that are already suggested, maybe upvote instead. And based upon that, I make a lot of decisions on what videos to create. So make sure you use those suggestions instead of getting lost in the comments on YouTube. Still leave a YouTube comment, see what other people think. But definitely go to suggestions.imtimcorey.com to leave those suggestions so that you might see your question or issue answered in a future video. Just make sure that you are pretty specific or pretty clear in what you're looking for, and it's not just focused on just your specific issue, but something a wider audience would be interested in. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.